Hi, my name's Taylor Jansen, and today I'm going to be talking about English language learners and the difficulties that evaluations can present. So I want to explain a little bit about language variation. There are many variations of just the English language. The most common variation that's taught in schools is the standard American English or mainstream English. The language variation comes from differences in dialect, and this is learned at a young age by children when they're first learning to communicate. They can be a direct reflection of their first language culture, socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, gender, and age. The problem that this really presents for us is within the issue of dialect in education. The phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics can all become difficult for a student to decode. The most common dialect difference in America is the Black English or Ebonics. They have significant phonological sound differences, and they omit things in the past and present tense, so they really struggle with verbs. So, for example, a sentence could be, Eddie passed the ball, or Eddie passed the ball. And this is a difference between did he pass it or does he need to pass the ball. Another significant difference is in the Spanish language. They're very similar in certain language sounds, but they do not have a few of our vowels, and this can really lead to an interference with different expressions and also cause completely different meanings for words for them. They also order their sentences differently. So we put our descriptor before the noun and theirs comes afterwards. So in a normal sentence, they would say, the car red is mine. In an English sentence, it would say, the red car is mine. So this can cause issues for students trying to learn to decode as well. Okay, so question 1 is, what is your professional opinion on how these differences impact assessment approaches in oral language? I really had to refer to the book on this one because I have some limited class experience. But what I came up with is dialect is easily mistaken for a language disorder, and professionals really need to realize the use of repetitive and expressive language. So during assessments, there are 3 main types of errors that a professional can make. The first error is assuming that the student is from a diverse group, is capable of normal dialect. This leads the student to fail the language competence, or their ability to decode language is incorrect. The second one is if the student is assessed by a professional who overcompensates for dialect, then they will overlook a true disorder due to the dialect characteristics. Thirdly, a professional can undercompensate for a dialect and mistake the differences in dialect for a true language disorder. Next, the issue of assessment is dialects create a cultural bias for standards of testing, and it really discriminates on more of an auditory level. So words sound alike, but they have completely different meanings, and professionals who are administering the test have a hard time recognizing this. So such as tug and tub. To tug on a rope to a student would be said to tub on a rope. Another issue is that dialect differences can really affect the student's academics and the pronunciation of their phonemes, and it can result in what appears to be decoding error when really it's just them having a difficult time saying a word correctly. They can also be affected in this way by written language. A student might want to spell it how it sounds to them and not how it conforms to standard English, such as the word tug and tub. A student may be trying to spell the word tug, but spell it T-U-B instead. Another issue with assessment is that culturally fair tests have not been developed as quickly as standard English tests. Students have to be first established that they speak with a dialect, and it can't be assumed just because of their cultural or ethnic or social backgrounds. A strategy that can be used to really combat this issue is to collect speech samples from more of a natural setting with the student. This would be from the general classroom or when they're amongst their friends and family. Because dialect variations can really resemble those with language disorders, it's really important to get the variation between the two. Assessments for these English language learners really help determine the proficiency and of their first language and then in the English language. So research suggests that if we assess a student in their first language and then we assess the student in their second language, the two are interdependent, and that their academic skills will truly transfer from one language to another. So if they struggle in their first language, such as Spanish, then they will struggle with the second language. But if they are fluent in the first language and they understand all of those needed characteristics, and then they're just having a hard time catching on to English, they may just need a little bit of English assistance. Question number 2 is, what intervention options are available to students who are English learners if they need additional services? This has been very difficult because bilingual programs have kind of fallen to disfavor in the United States. It's due to kind of 3 different reasons. The first is political movements. Politics really wants English to be the sole U.S. language. Secondly is the No Child Left Behind Act. They have requirements to improve academic achievement, and it really falls to the school's accountability. So when the school is struggling with students such as these, they tend to push them along to make their achievement look better. The third reason is there's such a large number of different languages in a lot of bigger schools that they have a hard time compensating for the variety that they have. So the one that we actually use in our school district here is called English for Speakers of Other Language, ESOL, and it's to assist the learners in developing English as quickly as possible so we can get them back into the general education classroom. So within this classroom, the teachers have their own lesson plans, they lead class sessions, they assign homeworks to the students, and they give tests and assess them regularly to make sure that they're gaining the progress that they need. They have specific subjects that they focus on, and it includes vocabulary, spelling, verb conjunction, grammar, and pronunciation. They also do things outside of academic things. They teach students more about the American culture so they can better understand why some words are used in certain ways. And they also can assist them later in their careers, like finding jobs or give them access to college or vocational trainings. Another way that we can combat this is through secondary efforts through the general education teacher. And this is because oral language is not a subject of its own, and it's really just expected to be known here in our classrooms. So certain things that these teachers can do is use non-linguistic communication, such as eye gestures, eye contact, or pauses in their speak when they're giving a presentation. They can present organization material to the students that kind of outlines the main points for them to prepare them for the lesson. They can slow their pace down when they're presenting important information and repeat the most important parts, really emphasize what the student needs to know. Or they can also provide examples that would illustrate and give really just concrete, abstract information to the students so they can compare one language to the other or really understand what the teacher is trying to explain. This is kind of just an additional step to universal design for learning, the idea of appealing to all learners in the classroom. They just need a little extra help so they can relate from one item to the next through language. Question 3 is, why are students who are culturally and linguistically diverse sometimes over or under identified for special education services? Over and under identification they kind of go hand in hand. One is just as bad as the other. They can lead to quick referrals or dumping grounds or just a lack of overall available resources. So over identification is considered a lack of language disability, and it can often make a referral too quickly. So the assessment instruments are not accurate, and they may not be culturally or linguistically sensitive to the student. Also, the decision could be made because the general education classroom cannot support them. Even though the student doesn't have a disability, the teacher feels as if they can't give them the supplement that they need, so they refer them to special education instead. This can really create a large gap for the student, and it just makes the special education classroom a dumping ground, and it can really hinder the student's learning if the special education teacher doesn't provide the support that they need. Under-identification Under-identification occurs when English language learners do not get the special education that they need. So it's really challenging to identify them in general because they have widespread underachievement. And their characteristics are similar to those of non-English language learners. Another reason under-identification happens is because educators may believe that this is part of the process, the difficult steps of the students learning English. Sometimes schools will put in an informal policy that says, we cannot refer this English language learner into the special education system for 2 to 3 years to discourage referrals, to kind of combat the over-referral, and it can have kind of the opposite effect. There's a lot of misconceptions that English language learners their language support is more important than their special education support, so they really want the student to learn English before they start providing special education procedures. The other reason for under-identification is that we don't have bilingual special education professionals, and the student would be better served in the general education classroom. So all of these under-identifications can really violate the student's right and can cause more serious problems over time and even make it more difficult for them to learn English, and it just creates a higher dropout rate overall in the whole school system. So English language learners and assessments pose a really significant problem in a lot of school systems, especially in major cities where there's a lot of cultural differences, and they really require adjustment in the classroom and within using informal assessments, and it requires a lot of special efforts by the general education teacher to help identify their needs. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I really hope that it was full of a lot of valuable information, and thank you for listening.